They are both in a relationship, but I want it
for myself.
Can you help me, Achi?
I thought you are in a relationship with my friend Adanne.
I never really loved Adanne.
I just wanted to use her as a medium to get to you.
She was the bait for the bigger fish.
She just stood there in shock, unable to move. She didn't believe what her eyes were seeing. She tried so hard to convince herself that it wasn't real that she didn't even notice when the plate and the calabash she was holding fell from her hands, producing a loud, crashing sound. It was Afika, her lover and husband-to-be, in bed with Adaku, in a very questionable position. Adaku and Afika, who had been very distracted by their rendezvous, quickly turned to the door to see what had caused such a loud, crashing sound. They were shocked to see Adanne, standing frozen at the door, staring at them with a broken bowl and a goosey soup spilling out by her feet. Afika, just realizing the gravity of the situation, pushed Adaku off him and then rushed to Adanne to try to explain things to her. But Adaku just lay where she was, nonchalantly. Adanne then turned her eyes from Afika to Adaku in disgust. "Oh, so this is what was going on? Why you have been giving me attitude? I should have known. I was such a fool for trusting in our friendship." She then turned to Afika and said, "There is nothing to explain. I already saw everything I needed to see. I don't have much to say to you. You can continue from where you stopped with her. I'm done with both of you," she said intently, with tears threatening to flow from her cheeks. She was at least expecting her friend to show a little bit of remorse for what she did, but instead, Adaku just said to Afika, "You heard what she said. We can continue. At least now we don't have to hide it from her anymore. How could you even push me away from you like that because of this hideous creature?" she said to Afika, completely ignoring Adanne. Adanne, upon hearing her friend's words, ran off in tears, not daring to turn back, while Adaku, on the other hand, just stood up and dragged Afika, who was deep in thought, back to bed. She was happy that Adanne had finally found out that her lover was with her, so she didn't have to hide anything anymore. She didn't feel any bit of remorse for what she did, or how she made her friend feel, and didn't even bother to go and apologize to Adanne. Sometime later, Adanne was still disappointed by the betrayal of her friend and her lover, Afika, who had even promised to marry her. She had told most of her family members about it, and they were all happy and expectant for the official marriage proposal. She thought of what people would say when they heard why Afika didn't later propose. She then finally confided in her mother about the entire incident, who encouraged her, telling her that the gods were probably taking Afika away to bring something better into her life. "My daughter," she said after listening to Adanne's story, "you know, sometimes the gods take away some things from our lives to make way for better things. Who knows, maybe they were just distractions that needed to be cleared out. It happens sometimes," she said as she hugged her crying daughter, consoling her. Months later, Adanne was already doing well for herself. She had long gotten over Adaku, Afika, and the entire incident. She had become the chief dancer of their village. One day, she and her dancing group were summoned to dance for their king, who was hosting a naming ceremony for his first son. When they were done dancing and were about to leave, she was informed by one of the palace guards that someone seated at the high table was interested in meeting her after the event, and that she would be escorted to the high table after the event to meet the person. She was curious and anxious as to why someone from the seat of affluence would be interested in meeting her, a mere dancer, but she decided to go anyway. When the event came to an end, she was escorted by 2 guards to the high table, and when she looked around to see who was calling her, she only saw one man seated at the high table. He had his legs crossed and was wearing a very expensive-looking batik white dress and sunglasses. When the man noticed her presence, he beckoned her to come closer, offering her a seat. "Good evening, mate. I enjoyed the performance of you and your group. It was very refreshing to watch," the man said, smiling and starting the conversation. "Thank you, sir," she replied politely with a smile. "Without wasting much of your time, let me go straight to the point of why I called you here. I have a series of events which I will be hosting this month, and I will need you and your group to perform at each one of them. I would also need to see you every day to oversee your preparations for each dance presentation. Would you be able to do it? It would be very rewarding. Adanne opened her mouth as if wanting to say something, but then she caught herself and paused thoughtfully. Sure, she needed the money badly, but she also didn't want to get too close to the rich man, especially after her experience with Fika. After a long, tense silence, she finally turned to the man with a nod of the head. Yes, sir, I will do it. And with that, the man thanked her and dismissed her, and she went home. Days turned into weeks, and Adanne kept visiting the man every day. It was all strictly business talk until one day the man suddenly said to her after their work, "Maiden, stay behind. I want to have a word with you." Adanne was a little surprised at the sudden request, but she obliged him. "You have never actually told me your name," he said to Adanne. "Well, you've never asked," Adanne replied coyly. He ran his hand down his head and then said to her, "Well, I'm asking you now. What is your name?" "Adanne, but my friends and family members call me Ada for short." "How about yours?" she added after a brief pause. "Prince." Adanne was shocked. It was the same prince who had just returned from Germany, the rich trader who was in charge of the entire batik trade between Germany and Nigeria, and she was just talking casually with him. She was utterly surprised but didn't let her face betray her emotions. "Okay, Prince, it's nice to finally get to know you." "The pleasure is all mine, Ada," he replied, studying Ada's surprised expression with a smirk tugging at his lips. "I can now call you Ada as we will be good friends from now," he added, still smirking coyly. Adanne hesitated for a while but then replied, laughing, Okay, Prince, if you say so. Who am I to refuse, my Oga?" They then had a little small talk, after which Adanne went home. As the days went by, Adanne and Prince's relationship grew stronger. They would discuss trivial things after work, and Prince would occasionally ask Adanne to dance for him. If there was one way to Prince's heart, it was good traditional dance and shaking of the waist, talents which Adanne had at her fingertips. Prince enjoyed every one of Adanne's performances for him, and soon he found himself falling in love with her. One day, after their usual business, and while they were having their friendly discussion, Prince told Adanne about his feelings and declared his intentions to marry her. She was very skeptical about his proposal at first because, after her experience with Afika, she didn't want anything to do with rich men. So she told Prince she needed some time to think it through. She confided in her mother and kept on thinking. Although she had already fallen for Prince, she didn't want to let herself be hurt by another man, especially a very rich one with many admirers. But as the days went by, she kept finding reasons to trust Prince. He continually proved to her that he wasn't like her ex-lover, and even her mother, who was carefully observing him, advised her to marry Prince. After careful consideration, she finally accepted his proposal once she had completed all her work for him. She finished all her tasks, and then she and Prince got married in a grand ceremony that had tongues wagging throughout Yamun's land and made all the maids jealous that their dream man had finally been swept away by Adanne. Adanne even performed a special dance with her dance group on Monday. A month after the wedding, Adanne and Prince left Yamun's land for Germany, where Prince resided. Adaku, on the other hand, had been abandoned by Afika with a child. She was also disowned by her parents and thrown out of their house due to the disgrace she had brought upon the family. In Yamun's land, it was a matter of utmost shame for a family if their daughter gave birth outside wedlock, especially if there was no father to claim the child. When she made inquiries, she discovered that Afika was just a traveler who had come to their village to set up his batik business and then return to his land. She also learned that he had a full family, a wife and grown-up children, in a faraway land that no one in Yamun's knew about. When the burden of taking care of the child without any support became overwhelming, she remembered her friend Adanne. She recalled how Adanne had sacrificed for her when she was urinating one day, and how the scar on Adanne's face could have been on her own face. She heard that her friend had married the famous batik trader, Afika's boss, and thought that Adanne might be able to help her. She regretted her actions and began crying. "Please, Ada, give me one more chance," she said to herself on her way to Adanne's house to ask for forgiveness and help to raise her child. When she arrived at the house, she asked Adanne's mother for Adanne, but her mother chased her out of the compound with a pestle in her hand. She continued, "My daughter is not here. She has traveled with her husband to Germany, where they will live. Let me see how you will snatch him there." Get out from here before I smash this pestle on that empty skull of yours, she said, banging the gate angrily on Adaku's face, leaving her to cry and blame herself and her greed for her misfortune. And that, my children, is the end of our story, Matsi Udemba finally said, taking a deep breath as he wrapped up his tale. I'm really glad Adaku got what she deserved in the end. And I'm even happier that she didn't meet Adanne when she went back to ask for forgiveness. She didn't genuinely change. Rather, she was just going back because she needed help. Knowing how emotional her friend was and Adanne's soft spot for her, she knew quite well that her friend couldn't see her in that condition and turn a blind eye to it. Despite their differences, Adanne would have probably even accepted her back, and who knows what would have happened next. She could have probably even repeated the same gimmick with Prince. You know, once a snake, always a snake, Ibuka said, shrugging his shoulders defiantly at roughly the same time Matsi Udemba wrapped up his tale. Nice observation, my boy. You've spoken well. Ifani, Matsi Udemba suddenly called, jolting the boy from his deep thoughts. He seemed to have been reflecting on the story he had just heard. Yes, uncle? What did you learn? Uncle, I learned that we should be mindful of the kind of people and company we keep. Your friends can make or mar you. Like in Adaku's case, yes, she was already a bad person, but even as she had bad intentions, she didn't know how to really go about it until she met up with her sister-in-law, Chidimna, who unfortunately was very familiar with such schemes. If she had good company and had met a good person who could give her good and sincere advice, they would have immediately reprimanded and cautioned her. They could have even made her reconsider her sinister thoughts and plans, consequently avoiding the terrible fate that befell her in the end. Unlike, Ifani was still speaking when Matsi Udemba cut him short with a wave of his hand. That's all right, my boy. You've spoken well. How about you, Ibuka? What did you learn? Well, uncle, I learned that we, as people, sometimes never know the value of what we have until we lose it. Adaku never valued Adanne, their friendship, or even her sacrifice for her. Following their story, Adaku always felt entitled. She always felt like Adanne was at her fingertips, and she could play and use her however she liked. She also believed she deserved better than her best friend, Adanne, mostly because she felt like she was more beautiful and her face wasn't flawed, unlike her friend Adanne, who got a huge scar on her cheek while trying to save her. She never felt bad or remorseful for her treacherous betrayal until her wickedness finally landed her in trouble. Then, everyone, including the snatched man, Ifika, and even her own family, abandoned her in her pregnancy. She then remembered Adanne, her friend who would always stand up and go down for her no matter what. But then it was already too late. Adanne had left her, and the country never to return, while she just stood shamefully outside the gate, shedding crocodile tears. A true case of when she needed her most, she vanished. Ah, nice one, Ibuka. Good job, my children. You've all spoken well, Matsi Udemba finally said. He wanted to dismiss them, but then his eyes suddenly drifted to Chidimna, who had been raising her hand enthusiastically since he finished his story. Udemna, you learned something too? The old man asked the little girl, surprised. Chidimna wasn't one to always speak up during gatherings like this, given how shy she was. Yes, uncle, I learned something too, the girl muttered shyly while looking around. I learned that we should not be selfish. We should not be selfish? Was that really part of the morals of this story? I don't think so, but yes, my dear, we should not be selfish.
So don't be selfish. Like this video, pen down your comments, as well as additional moral lessons in the comment box below. Share this video, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel for more African stories with me, Mazi Udemba, and I'll see you in the next video.